What if I told you that the Bible we all know might be missing important details about creation and the lives of the patriarchs, and even the very laws of God himself, the Book of Jubilees preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible claims to fill in those gaps, revealing hidden stories and offering deeper insight into God's divine plan. But here is the catch. This book has been banned in much of the Christian world. Why? In today's video, we will explore the mysterious Book of Jubilees, also called the Lesser Genesis, and learn why its 50 chapters were excluded from the mainstream Christian Bible. This ancient text contains lost details about the creation story, giving us a cosmic perspective on how angels, heavenly time, and hidden commandments were passed down to humanity. But the book goes even further. It also asserts that the calendar most of the world follows is incorrect, and that time itself was given a sacred structure by God, which few observe today. So why was this ancient text rejected by the early church? What secrets within it were deemed too controversial for Orthodox Christianity? The Book of Jubilees begins with the creation story, as we know it from Genesis, but extends far beyond what most Bibles contain. According to Jubilees, when God created the world, he did not just create life. He also established the structure of time, arranging it according to his divine order. This is where the concept of sacred time emerges. Unlike the traditional calendar we usually follow, the Book of Jubilees presents a precise solar calendar overseen by angels in heaven who govern the cosmic cycles. This is not just counting days. This is living, fully aligned with God's will. Jubilees says humanity is to be measured by this sacred calendar of 364 days divided into 4 seasons, each season containing exactly 91 days. This structure ensures that holy days, such as the Sabbath and festivals, always fall on the correct day. This is a perfect system, but it is one that the rest of the world has forgotten. In the Book of Genesis, the story begins with the creation of the earth, but Jubilees gives us a broader picture. Before the world was formed, angels that were created on the very first day of creation. These angels played a crucial role in managing the universe, including regulating time and the seasons. The Book of Jubilees reveals that these angels were given specific duties by God, some overseeing natural phenomena like the movements of celestial bodies, while others acted as messengers and guardians of God's law. The idea of angels governing the heavens also appears in other ancient texts, but the Book of Jubilees emphasizes how these angels to maintain order in the cosmos, ensuring the sun, moon, and stars follow their sacred paths. God ordained that the sun must keep its course according to the division of seasons and festivals. These angels not only watch over humanity, they also control the nature of time. They also control the nature of time, and when people fall out of harmony with God's time, it leads to chaos. A central theme throughout the Book of Jubilees. According to Jubilees, the solar calendar is the only correct way to keep time, and the Book of Jubilees affirms that the world should follow the solar calendar, not the lunar calendar, which many ancient cultures, including the Israelites, eventually adopted. According to Jubilees, the solar calendar is the only correct way to measure time because it perfectly aligns with God's divine order. The book explains that the solar year, consisting of 364 days, divided into 52 perfect weeks. Each season, spring, Summer, autumn, and winter contains exactly 13 weeks or 91 days. This system ensures that the Sabbath day and other sacred festivals are always observed on the correct day each year. This solar calendar is very similar to the Ethiopian calendar still used today by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The Ethiopian year is divided into 13 months, 12 months of 30 days, each with an Apuione, additional month called Pagum, consisting of 5 or 6 days to compensate for the discrepancy. The Ethiopian calendar may be one of the few modern systems still reflecting the sacred time described in chapter 6, verse 37. Regarding the holy years according to the lunar calendar, used by many cultures in the ancient world, including the Israelites, it is considered a corruption of this divine order. The lunar calendar is irregular, causing months and festivals to shift over time, and the holy years warn that this deviation from the solar calendar leads to spiritual chaos. Some will surely observe the moon, but they will disrupt the crops and create an abominable day, a day of testimony. The holy years, chapter 6, verse 37. For the holy years following the lunar calendar is not just a mistake, it is a form of disobedience to the will of God. The book suggests that by returning to the solar calendar, humanity can realign itself with the divine rhythms established at the creation of the world. The Book of Holy Years reaffirms the traditional 6-day creation story it found in Genesis, but goes further, restoring the world to harmony with God's order, bringing a time of rest, the 7th day. He sanctified it as a sacred institution, a perpetual law given to both humans and angels. The Sabbath is viewed as the foundation of time, a day set apart from the beginning of creation and intended to be kept forever. The concept of the Sabbath as a cosmic principle is very important in the holy years. It not only governs the weekly cycle, but also connects to the larger structure of time, including the 49-year holy year cycles. These cycles aim to bring the world back into harmony with God's order, providing times of rest, deliverance, and renewal for the land, humanity, and the angelic realm. For he sanctified the 7th day and blessed that day. He sanctified the 7th day and blessed that day into the larger structure of time, including the 49-year Jubilee cycles. These cycles aim to bring the world back into harmony with God's order, bringing a time of rest, deliverance, and renewal for the land, for the people, and the heavenly realm. For he sanctified the 7th day and blessed that day forever, as a sign of holiness for all his works. The Jubilee Year Music, 21. The emphasis on the Sabbath as a perpetual law shows that the holy years are not just retelling the Genesis story. They also reveal the deeper meaning behind the time cycles governing all things. The Book of Jubilee Years tells us that Adam was created on the 6th day exactly as described in Genesis, but it adds a new layer of meaning to his story. According to the Book of Jubilee, years after creating Adam, God gave him specific commandments. From the beginning, laws, including keeping the Sabbath laws about purification and rules regarding marriage, along with worship. These laws, transmitted by angels, were to be obeyed by Adam and his descendants as part of the covenant God made with humanity. While Genesis mentions God's direct interaction with Adam, the Book of Jubilee Years introduces angels as mediators, teaching Adam how to observe God's commandments. These angels, especially those known as the angels of the presence, ensured that Adam and Eve understood the laws of holiness, sacrifice, and moral conduct. And on the 6th day of the 2nd week, God brought, according to his word, to Adam all the animals, all the livestock, the birds and everything that moves on the ground, and everything that moves in, and water according to each kind, and according to each kind. The beasts entered, on the 1st day the cattle, on the 2nd day the birds, on the 3rd day everything that moves on the ground, on the 4th day, and everything that moves in the water on the 5th day. The Book of Jubilees, chapter 31, verse 2. The interaction with this angel aims to reinforce the idea that God's laws are not merely human creations, but are part of the heavenly order. The angels taught Adam that he must keep God's law as an eternal covenant, just as they obey those laws in heaven. Could God's law passed through the angels have been given to humans long before Moses received the 10 Commandments? And what can we learn from these ancient laws? If you are curious about the laws God gave to Adam and how they compare to the laws of Moses, please let us know in the comments if we should delve deeper into the ancient commandments handed down from the earliest days of creation. After Adam and Eve's fall, the Book of Jubilees adds new perspectives to the story about their children Cain and Abel. While Genesis states that Cain killed Abel, the Book of Jubilees provides more details about the events that followed. Cain's killing of Abel is seen as the first major violation of God's law, a sin that brought spiritual consequences and for all humanity. But while Cain was banished, the Book of Jubilees emphasizes that the righteous line of humanity continued through Seth, Adam's third son. In the Book of Jubilees, Seth is portrayed as a righteous figure, taught to keep the laws handed down by the angels. This paved the way for later descendants, including Noah, to continue the covenant with God. The story of Noah and the Great Flood is widely known through Genesis, but the Book of Jubilees brings additional revelations about what happened before and after the Great Flood. In the Book of Jubilees, the focus is not only on Noah's survival, but also on the covenant God made with him, afterward a covenant opening the stage for later descendants, including Noah, to continue the covenant. The story of Noah and the Great Flood is very famous in Genesis, but the Book of Jubilees provides additional revelations about what happened before and after the Great Flood. In the Book of Jubilees, the focus is not only on Noah's survival, but also on the covenant God established with him. Afterward, a covenant emphasizing the importance of purity, righteousness, and obedience to God's law. Before the flood, the Book of Jubilees goes deeper into the earth's corruption. It especially focuses on the Nephilim, descendants of fallen angels and human women, while Genesis chapter 6 verses 1 to 4 only briefly mentions the Nephilim. The Book of Jubilees provides more context, showing that these giants contributed to the wickedness that led God to cleanse the earth with the flood. Lawlessness increased on the earth, and all living beings corrupted their ways, including humans, cattle, wild animals, birds, and everything that moves on the ground. All corrupted their ways of life and rules, and they began to eat each other. The Book of Jubilees, chapter 5, verse 2. This moral decay was not only caused by human sin, but also by the influence of fallen angels who created forbidden knowledge and damaged the natural order. God's reaction was swift. He sent the flood to wipe out this corruption, but he preserved Noah and his family because of their righteousness. After the flood, the Book of Jubilees reveals that God not only promised never to flood the earth again, he also established a new covenant with Noah that included specific laws about purity and sacrifice. These laws, later passed down to the people of Israel, were meant to help humanity maintain holiness and avoid the corruption that led to the flood. An important detail in the Book of Jubilees is that Noah was instructed to keep the Sabbath and follow laws, similar to Adam's regarding sacrifice and purity. This covenant marked a new beginning for humanity, but also emphasized the importance of obeying God's law to avoid further judgment. The laws about sacrifice, the law of Moses which Noah practiced, as part of this covenant. These laws include instructions on how to offer burnt offerings to the Lord God and how to maintain purity of both body and soul. In Genesis chapter 12, we are introduced to Abraham, when God called him to leave his homeland to go to the land of Canaan, but the Book of Jubilees takes us back to Abraham's childhood, adding a completely new dimension to his story. According to the Book of Jubilees, Abraham grew up in a family immersed in idolatry. His father, Terah, worshipped false gods. This is not mentioned in Genesis, but the Book of Jubilees paints a vivid picture of young Abraham who rejected the pagan customs around him, instead choosing to follow the one true God. And he said, "Father, tell me what these idols you worship are." And Abraham saw that it was a stone image, and Abraham burned them before everyone and fled into the wilderness. Book of Jubilees, chapter 11, verses 16 to 17. While Genesis focuses on Abraham's obedience when God called him to leave home, the Book of Jubilees portrays Abraham as a revolutionary figure, destroying the idols in his father's house and standing firmly against the idolatry of his time. This spiritual rebellion laid the foundation for Abraham's later role as the father of the chosen people who would reject pagan customs and follow God's law. One of the most striking differences between Genesis and the Book of Jubilees is the idea that Abraham destroyed the idols in his father's house and boldly resisted the idolatry of his era. This spiritual rebellion paved the way for Abraham's later role as the father of the chosen people, who would reject pagan customs and follow the law of God. One of the most notable differences between Genesis and the Book of Jubilees is the idea that Abraham obeyed the divine law long before Moses was born. In Genesis, there is no mention of Abraham being given the law apart from the covenant of circumcision. Aside from the covenant of circumcision in Genesis chapter 17, however, in the Book of Jubilees, Abraham is portrayed as one who observed the Sabbath, offered sacrifices, and followed other laws often associated with Moses. According to the Book of Jubilees, these laws were not created during Moses' time. They were handed down from angels to the patriarchs, starting with Adam. Abraham received these commandments from angels, and he was expected to observe them as part of his covenant with God, and he was taught by angels about what was written on the heavenly tablets. The Book of Jubilees, chapter 12, verse 25. Unlike Genesis, where Abraham's actions are seen as part of a personal faith journey, the Book of Jubilees presents him as a figure belonging to a cosmic plan. He was guided by angels, and the laws he followed were part of the divine order governing heaven and earth. These laws include the Sabbath and purification laws that Moses would later formalize. The covenant of circumcision is one of the most important moments in Abraham's story. In Genesis chapter 17, God commands Abraham to circumcise himself and all the males in his household as a sign of the covenant. But the Book of Jubilees goes further, revealing that this is not only a symbolic act, it is part of a cosmic law inscribed on the heavenly tablets. According to the Book of Jubilees, circumcision is not only a sign for Abraham's descendants, it is a divine law that has existed since the creation of the world. This covenant is inscribed on the heavenly tablets, which are regarded as God's plan for creation, containing all the laws governing both angels and humans. This law is for every generation forever, with no circumcision allowed outside the appointed days, and no day skipped within 8 days, because it is an eternal commandment decreed and recorded on the heavenly tablets. The Book of Jubilees, chapter 15, verse 25. In Genesis, the focus is on Abraham's obedience to God's command. The Book of Jubilees describes this act as part of a much greater divine order. Circumcision is not just a physical sign, it is a way to harmonize with the cosmic laws that govern the universe. The story of binding Isaac, called the Akedah, is one of the most powerful moments in Genesis chapter 22 verses 1 through 19, where God tests Abraham's faith by asking him to offer his son Isaac as a sacrifice. The Book of Jubilees recounts this story, but adds several layers of meaning. In the Book of Jubilees, the test is not only between Abraham and God, it is part of a greater spiritual battle. According to the Book of Jubilees, the angel, Mastema, a figure often associated with Satan, proposes this test to God, hoping Abraham will fail. Mastema represents the forces of evil, always seeking to undermine the righteous. The Book of Jubilees adds that angels intervened during the binding of Isaac, and God allowed the test to demonstrate that Abraham's faith was greater than the temptation of evil. And I stood before him and before the Lord of Mastema, before God, hoping Abraham would fail. Mastema represents the evil forces, always trying to sabotage the righteous. The Book of Jubilees also adds that angels intervened during the covenant's test, and God permitted the trial to prove that Abraham's faith was greater than the temptations of evil. And I stood before him and before the chief of Mastema, and God said, "Command him not to lay to a hand on the child, nor to do anything to him, for I have shown that he fears you." The Book of Jubilees, chapter 18, verse 10. The story in the Book of Jubilees introduces an entirely new spiritual significance. This is not only a test of Abraham's obedience, it is part of the cosmic battle between good and evil. Mastema tries to lead Abraham into failure, but God's intervention shows that loyalty will always overcome evil. In Genesis, the story focuses on Abraham's personal trial, but in the Book of Jubilees, it is part of a larger spiritual narrative involving angelic forces and the struggle between good and evil. In Genesis, chapter 25, verse 23, we are told that before Jacob and Esau were born, God revealed to their mother Rebekah, that these two brothers would become leaders of two nations, and that the older brother Esau would serve the younger Jacob. The Book of Jubilees expands this prophecy, emphasizing that this is not merely a family dispute. It is part of a cosmic plan in which Jacob is always destined to inherit the blessing and continue the line of righteousness that began with Abraham. The Book of Jubilees adds a layer of destiny, revealing that Jacob was chosen from birth to fulfill the covenant, while Esau was destined to stray from God's plan. The book also notes that Isaac and Rebekah were given divine knowledge about Esau's rebellious character, and the opposition his descendants would bring against Israel in the future. And God said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples shall be separated from your body, and one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." Book of Jubilees, chapter 19, verse 13. See also Genesis, chapter 25, verse 23. Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples within you will be divided. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. In Genesis we see this conflict unfold through Jacob's wisdom and Esau's impulsiveness. But the Book of Jubilees explains that Jacob was always destined to inherit the birthright, and that his actions, though somewhat deceptive, were part of fulfilling the divine plan. One of the main distinctions in the Book of Jubilees is the portrayal of Esau, not only as the brother who lost the birthright. The Book of Jubilees emphasizes that Esau represents a rebellious lineage opposed to God's chosen people. His descendants are described as a people who will rise up in opposition to Israel, fulfilling the prophecy that the older shall serve the younger, while Genesis mentions the hostility between Esau and Jacob following the birthright and blessing events. Genesis chapter 27, verse 41. The Book of Jubilees expands on this theme, showing that Esau's descendants will become a nation directly opposed to the descendants of Jacob, that is, the future Israelites. This is part of the great cosmic conflict often emphasized in the Book of 50 Weeks, the battle between Jacob's righteousness and Esau's rebellion. Emphasizing the battle between Jacob's righteousness and Esau's rebellion. And Esau took wives, sons, and all that he had, then went up to the hill country of Seir, living there. And Esau became a nation, and they oppressed the descendants of Jacob. Book of 50 Weeks. See Genesis chapter 37, verse 1. So Esau, that is Edom, settled in the hill country. The Book of Jubilees clarifies that Esau's rebellion was not only personal, but also national. His descendants would become those who had many conflicts with the Israelites, reflecting the spiritual battle that began with their ancestors. Genesis chapter 27. But the Book of Jubilees goes further, emphasizing that Jacob not only received a blessing. In Genesis, this blessing ensures that Jacob becomes the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. Genesis chapter 27. But the Book of Jubilees goes further, emphasizing that Jacob not only received a blessing, but also received the sacred laws that were passed down from Abraham. According to the Book of Jubilees, after Jacob received the blessing, God and the angels revealed to him the laws that he and his descendants must obey. These laws included keeping the Sabbath, the laws of purity, and the sacred calendar laws that would later be formalized in the Mosaic Law. Jacob is described as the keeper of these laws, entrusted with the responsibility of ensuring that his descendants, the future Israelites, would observe them as part of the covenant with God. And the Lord appeared to him at night and said, "I am the Lord God of Abraham your father and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your descendants, and your descendants will be as numerous as the stars of the heavens." Book of Jubilees, chapter 27, verse 23. See also Genesis chapter 28, verses 11 to 15. The vision of the ladder and God's promise to Jacob. In the Book of Jubilees, the laws Jacob received are part of the cosmic order governing both heaven and earth. The emphasis on Jacob as heir to the sacred law elevates his role beyond mere inheritance. He becomes the keeper of God's eternal commandments, linking him to the heavenly stone tablets mentioned earlier in the Book of Jubilees. The Book of Jubilees does not stop at the rivalry between Jacob and Esau. It expands this conflict into a prophetic vision of the ongoing struggle between their descendants. The book suggests that the nations descended from Esau will always oppose the descendants of Jacob, that is, the Israelites, throughout history. This goes beyond the personal feud between two brothers, ties into the idea of a spiritual battle between righteousness, Jacob Israel, and rebellion, Esau Edom. In the Book of Jubilees, this prophetic struggle is not only about territorial disputes, it is part of the great cosmic war between the forces of good and evil. The lineage of Esau represents the nations that will become enemies of God's chosen people, and this tension persists throughout biblical history. The spiritual confrontation between Israel and Esau's descendants plays a key role in the apocalyptic vision of the Book of Jubilees, linking the conflict with the end times. And Jacob and his sons went down to Egypt to meet Joseph, while Esau's sons stayed in the land of Edom. From that day on, the hostility between the nations remained. Book of Jubilees, chapter 4, verse 53. See Genesis chapter 33, verse 16. So from that day, Esau began to return. The emphasis on Jacob as heir to the divine law elevates his role beyond merely friend, being the firstborn. He becomes the keeper of God's eternal commandments, linking him to the heavenly tablets mentioned earlier in the Book of Jubilees. The Book of Jubilees does not stop at the rivalry between Jacob and Esau. It expands this conflict into a prophetic vision of the ongoing struggle between their descendants. The book suggests that the nations descended from Esau will continually oppose the descendants of Jacob the Israelites throughout history. This goes beyond the personal feud between two brothers and relates to the idea of a spiritual battle between righteousness, Jacob, Israel, and rebellion, Esau, Edom. In the Book of Jubilees, this prophetic struggle is not only about territorial disputes, it is part of a larger cosmic battle between the forces of good and evil. The descendants of Esau represent the peoples who will become enemies of God's chosen people, and this tension between God's chosen people and other nations continues throughout biblical history. The spiritual opposition between Israel and the descendants of Esau plays a key role in the apocalyptic vision of the Book of 50 Weeks. The sons of Esau went down to Egypt to meet Joseph, while the sons of Esau remained in the land of Edom. From there, hostility between the nations persisted. The Book of 50 Weeks, chapter 4, verse 53. See also Genesis chapter 33, verse 16. On that day, Esau began to return. Consider how the vision of this ongoing spiritual struggle reflects the larger themes of the Book of 50 Weeks, where the story of the patriarchs is part of a greater cosmic plan, a plan that involves not only the cosmos. The patriarchs are part of a larger cosmic plan, a plan not only concerning Abraham's family, but also the fate of nations and the final battle between good and evil. In Genesis, we see these 12 sons, Reuben, Simeon, the wives Leah and Rachel, along with their handmaids. These 12 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin, became the leaders of the tribes of Israel. However, the Book of Jubilees adds a sacred in order to the birth of these sons, showing that their births were not only the result of human relationships, but also a divine arrangement, part of a predestined plan set by God. According to the Book of Jubilees, the timing and order of their births were arranged by God to align with the sacred calendar. The book emphasizes that each son was esoteric, born according to a sacred schedule, making their births part of a greater cosmic plan. Jacob's wives and handmaids gave birth to 12 sons each, at a time appointed by God, and their destinies were recorded on heavenly tablets. Jubilees chapter 28 verse 12. See also Genesis chapter 29 verses 31 to 34, the births of Jacob's sons. While Genesis focuses on the narrative events surrounding the births of these sons, Jubilees stresses that their births were recorded in the heavenly tablets, reinforcing the idea that the 12 tribes are part of God's predestined plan for the world. One important moment in Genesis is the story of Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, who lost his birthright after committing a grave sin in Genesis chapter 35, verse 22. Jubilees expands on this event, emphasizing the spiritual consequences and explaining why Judah and Levi rose to replace that position. In Jubilees, Reuben's sin is viewed as a violation of long-established sacred laws. His actions were not only seen as a personal failure, but also a spiritual offense that disqualified him from leading the tribes. This allowed Judah, the fourth son, to become the tribal leader, and Levi to take on the priestly role, which was part of the sacred order established by God. Because of his sin, the firstborn Reuben was excluded from the inheritance, and Judah was chosen as leader over his brothers, while Levi was set apart for the priesthood forever. Jubilees chapter 33, verse 10. See also Genesis chapter 49, verses 3 to 4. Reuben was disqualified because of his sin. While Genesis mentions Reuben's disqualification, Jubilees places greater emphasis on how this event fits into the cosmic plan. Judah's rise is part of God's eternal law, and Levi was consecrated for the priesthood, linking their destinies to the larger spiritual framework governing Israel's future. In the Bible, the tribe of Levi is dedicated to the priesthood, with Moses and Aaron coming from this tribe. Exodus chapter 28. But in Jubilees, the role of Levi as the priestly tribe is seen as part of an eternal ordinance. The book emphasizes that the priesthood of Levi is not merely a tribal duty. It was established in the heavenly tablets long before the Levitical priesthood was officially instituted. According to the Book of Jubilees, Moses from the tribe of Levi was chosen by God as the spiritual leader of the tribes, responsible for ensuring that the sacred laws were observed. His priestly role is described as part of the cosmic order, and he was entrusted with special duties connecting heaven and earth. Jacob was set apart for the eternal priesthood to offer sacrifices and mediate between the people and God as it was ordained in the heavenly tablets. The Book of Festivals, chapter 32, verse 17, refer also to Genesis and Exodus, chapter 28. The descendants of Jacob were set apart as priests, while Genesis and Exodus focus on the Levitical priesthood in Moses' time. The Book of Festivals highlights Jacob's role as part of God's plan from the very beginning. This makes Jacob's priesthood not merely a response to historical circumstances, but an essential part of the cosmic order existing before the events on Mount Sinai. In Genesis, 2 sons of Jacob became leaders of the 12 tribes, and we see their journey gradually settling in the Promised Land. But in the Book of Festivals, the tribes are not just land inheritors. They are described as guardians of God's law, charged with maintaining the sacred commandments handed down from Abraham and Ishmael. According to the Book of Festivals, each tribe carries a specific spiritual responsibility and is expected to follow the laws inscribed on the heavenly tablets. The book stresses that the 12 tribes were not only chosen to inherit the land, but also as keepers of God's commandments, ensuring that God's law is observed through all generations. And the Lord said to Jacob, "This is the law for your children, and their descendants forever written on the heavenly tablets, so they may follow it and live." Book of Festivals, chapter 29, verse 6. See also Genesis chapter 49. The blessings of Jacob for his sons. While Genesis says Jacob's sons became leaders of the tribes, the Book of Festivals adds that they were also tasked with ensuring God's law was passed down to future generations. Each tribe plays a cosmic role in preserving the sacred order, connecting their actions to the spiritual destiny of Israel. In Genesis, Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery out of jealousy for their father's favor. Genesis chapter 37. However, the Book of Festivals views this event from a cosmic consequence perspective. According to the Book of Festivals, the brothers' betrayal was not just a family dispute. It was a grave sin against the sacred order, and their guilt exceeded what is described in Genesis. In the Book of Festivals, the act of selling Joseph is a great offense against God's heavenly law, and the brothers are warned that they will face divine punishment for this act unless they repent. This is a significant difference from Genesis, which focuses more on the brothers' jealousy and personal sin. In the Book of Festivals, the brothers' actions have cosmic implications. Their betrayal disrupts the sacred plan and places them under God's judgment. And the brothers sold Joseph into slavery, and their sin is recorded on the heavenly tablets because of their act of betrayal, breaking the divine plan and placing them under the judgment of God. And his brothers sold Joseph into slavery, and their sin was recorded on the heavenly tablets because they broke the eternal law. And it was decreed that their descendants would suffer until they repented of their great sin. The Book of 50 Weeks, chapter 34, verses 4 through 9. The emphasis on these heavenly tablets makes their sin part of a greater cosmic order, linking the brothers' actions to the future suffering of the people of Israel under Egyptian slavery. Their betrayal set the stage for God's plan to redeem Israel through the Exodus, which was foretold in Kundadi, the heavenly realm. In Genesis, Joseph's rise to power in Egypt is described as the result of wisdom and the ability to interpret dreams. Genesis chapter 41. However, the Book of 50 Weeks expands by explaining and emphasizing that Joseph's rise to power was part of a heavenly design to create circumstances leading to the event in Egypt, not only because of his abilities, but also because God predestined his role as a savior for the people of Israel. The Book of 50 Weeks stresses that Joseph's rise to power was part of a heavenly design meant to create the circumstances leading to the Exodus. It was Joseph's destiny to bring his family to Egypt, where they would eventually become slaves and then be rescued through God's miraculous intervention. and it was written on the heavenly tablets that Joseph would rule Egypt, and through him the sons of Israel would be saved from famine, but they would also be held captive in Egypt for a broxus time. Book of 50 Weeks, chapter 42, verse 2. In this way, Joseph's life is described as a cosmic event, with his rise to power serving a much greater purpose in God's plan to save Israel. The Book of 50 Weeks directly links Joseph's success with the heavenly order, showing it was not just chance or human ability, it was predestined. One of the most fascinating predestined aspects is the involvement of angels in Joseph's life. While Genesis describes Joseph's close relationship with God through dreams, the Book of 50 Weeks goes further by introducing the role of angels in guiding and protecting Joseph throughout his journey. The Book of 50 Weeks describes how angels were sent by God to watch over Joseph from the time he was sold into slavery, ensuring that he would fulfill his destiny in Egypt. These angels intervened at critical moments in Joseph's life, protecting him from danger and ensuring he always remained faithful to God. The Lord sent his angels to protect Joseph on his journey to Egypt, so he would not be destroyed, for his life was precious in the eyes of the Lord, and his path was recorded on the heavenly tablets. Book of 50 Weeks, chapter 34, verse 21. The detail of angelic involvement adds a spiritual layer of protection to Joseph's story, not found in Genesis. It shows that Joseph's journey was not just a series of fortunate events. His path was carefully arranged by God with angels, ensuring he would rise to power and ultimately save his family. One of the most important differences between Genesis and the Book of 50 Weeks is that Joseph's role tied to the Exodus extends beyond his life. In Genesis, Joseph's role ends when his family settles in Egypt, but in the Book of 50 Weeks, his life is described as a prophecy foretelling the slavery and sepon arrangement by God and the angels, ensuring he would rise to power and to ultimately save his family. One of the most important differences between Genesis is that Joseph's role ends with his life connected to the Exodus. In Genesis, Joseph's role ends with his family settling in Egypt, but in the Book of 50 Weeks, his life is described as a prophecy, foretelling the slavery and final rescue of the Israelites, according to the Book of 50 Weeks. Joseph's rise in Egypt was not only to save his family from famine, it also involves fulfilling a prophecy leading to the Exodus. The Book of Jubilees explains that Joseph knew about the future slavery of his descendants and that he played a role in preparing them for their ultimate deliverance. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am about to die, but God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land to the land he promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Do not fear, for these things have been written down and sealed on the heavenly tablets." The Book of Jubilees, chapter 4, verse 69. This prophetic element is not prominent in Genesis, where Joseph's death is described as the end of his story. However, in the Book of Jubilees, Joseph's death is seen as a transition beginning, the slavery of Israel, but also a prophetic promise that they will eventually be delivered from Egypt. This links Joseph's life directly to the cosmic plan of salvation fulfilled through the Exodus. In Genesis, the slavery of Israel begins when a new Pharaoh arises, one who did not know Joseph and started oppressing the Israelites. Exodus, chapter 1, verse 18 to chapter 4, verse 14. But in the Book of Jubilees, this period of slavery is seen as part of the prophetic, cosmic plan that was recorded on the heavenly tablets. According to the Book of Jubilees, God predicted the slavery of Israel long before it happened, and it was part of his plan to lead them to the Exodus and the giving of the Mosaic Law. This prophetic plan directly connects to Joseph's role in bringing Israel into Egypt from the beginning. Although Joseph saved Israel from famine, their time in Egypt was predestined to end in slavery, which would ultimately demonstrate God's power in delivering his people. The heavenly tablets recorded that they would be oppressed in Egypt, and God would bring them out with great power and miracles so that his name would be glorified. The Book of Jubilees, chapter 4, verse 81. This makes Israel's time in Egypt not just historical events, but part of a larger spiritual story, where their slavery and eventual exodus were predestined to glorify God. The suffering of the Israelites is seen as a necessary trial, preparing them to receive the laws given at Mount Sinai. In Exodus, we see God directly acting to bring about plagues and rescue Israel from Pharaoh's oppression. Exodus chapters 7 to 12. However, the Book of Jubilees adds a layer of spiritual warfare to this story, introducing angels as key players in the battle between God and Pharaoh. According to the Book of Jubilees, the oppression of Israel is part of a spiritual war between the forces of good and evil. Mastema, a figure often associated with Satan, is described as actively working to harden Pharaoh's heart and increase Israel's suffering. Mastema and his evil spirits are said to have encouraged the Egyptians to oppress Israel even more severely, testing their loyalty to God. The prince of Mastema stood against them, aiming to destroy them through harsh slavery and cause them to abandon faith in the Lord. The Egyptians oppressed the Israelites even more harshly, testing their loyalty to God. The prince Mastema rose against them, seeking to destroy them through hard labor and cause them to forsake their faith in the Lord. The Book of 50 Weeks, chapter 4, verse 89. In this way, the Book of 50 Weeks adds a cosmic dimension to the story of Israel's slavery, showing that it was not merely earthly, political power struggles. Spiritual forces were at work, aiming to sabotage God's plan for Israel's deliverance. The plagues of Egypt were not only acts of divine judgment, but also part of a larger cosmic battle with Mastema, who tried to prevent Israel's exodus. In the Book of Jubilees, the heavenly tablets play a central role in explaining how the law and timing of the Exodus are part of God's eternal plan. According to the Book of Jubilees, the Exodus was not merely a reaction to the suffering of Israel. It was carefully planned and predetermined according to the divine calendar recorded on the heavenly tablets. The book emphasizes that the timing of the Exodus is connected to the observance of sacred laws, and that Jubilees explains that Israel's timing harmonizes with the divine order. Jubilees explains that Israel's timing in Egypt, their suffering, and the moment of deliverance were all predestined, and God's actions perfectly align with the cosmic timeline. The heavenly tablets record that on the 14th day of the first month at the appointed time, God would bring Israel out of Egypt. For that day was consecrated from the very beginning of creation. Jubilees, chapter 4, verse 91. This detail is found only in Jubilees. While the book of Exodus focuses on the events leading up to and during the plagues, Jubilees introduces the idea that the timing of the Exodus is part of a predetermined calendar, linked to cosmic laws. This makes the Exodus not merely a historical event, but also a part of the spiritual structure of creation. The 10 plagues in Exodus, Chapters 7 to 12 are a dramatic display of God's power sent to compel Pharaoh to release Israel. However, in Jubilees, the plagues have cosmic significance. They are not only divine punishments, but symbolic acts, demonstrating the failure of the Egyptian gods and the spiritual forces behind them. Jubilees explains that each plague serves to prove that only the God of Israel has true power over heaven and earth. Each plague is an assault not just on Pharaoh, but also on the ruling gods of Egypt, weakening the forces of darkness that seek to keep Israel in bondage. The Lord sent the plagues upon Egypt not only to judge Pharaoh, but also to show that the gods of Egypt are nothing before him because they are false powers, unable to stand against the Almighty. Jubilees, chapter 48, verse 11. From this perspective, the plagues are part of the great cosmic conflict between good and evil, where the God of Israel triumphs over both the physical and spiritual powers of Egypt. Jubilees also reveals that Mema and his evil forces operated behind the scenes to prevent Pharaoh from releasing Israel, but God's power overcame them at every turn. In Exodus, we see Moses receiving the law directly from God on Mount Sinai. But Jubilees adds that these laws were not created at that moment. They had been established beforehand. Mema and his evil forces worked behind the scenes to stop Pharaoh from freeing Israel. But the power of God overcame them in every situation. In the book of Exodus, we see Moses receive the law directly from God on Mount Sinai, but the book of Jubilees adds the detail that these laws were not created then. According to Jubilees, they had been set on the heavenly tablets long before Moses' time. According to Jubilees, the heavenly tablets are essentially a cosmic record of all the laws of God established from the very beginning of creation, and they serve as a guide for both angels and humans. Jubilees emphasizes that Moses was simply the recipient of the preordained law intended for all ages. Therefore, the law of Moses is not merely a set of rules for the people of Israel. It is part of the divine order governing the entire universe. This means the laws given to Moses were always meant to be revealed, and that moment aligns with the heavenly calendar. The law and its witnesses are predestined and recorded on the heavenly tablets created before even the foundation of the world, so they can guide every generation of the people of Israel. Jubilees chapter 6 verse 17. While the book of Exodus focuses on the dramatic revelation of the law at Sinai, Jubilees presents it as part of the cosmic plan. The Tovasi laws were already written in heaven, awaiting the right time to be revealed to Moses and the people of Israel. One of the most compelling. The Book of 50 Weeks affirms that the law of Moses had been observed long before Moses appeared, while the traditional Bible describes Abraham, Ishmael, and Jacob as righteous men. It does not clearly state that they received the full law. In contrast, the Book of 50 Weeks asserts that the patriarchs kept the Sabbath, performed sacrifices, and followed many laws that would later be given to Moses. This means the law of Moses is not a new development, but a restoration of laws that had been handed down from the beginning. The patriarchs received these commandments and precepts through divine revelation and by angels guiding them. For example, Abraham is described as keeping the Sabbath and dietary laws long before they were officially given to the people of Israel. Because Abraham kept the Sabbath, circumcised his sons, and obeyed the commandments of the Lord. These were inscribed on heavenly tablets, and the law was revealed to him through the angels of God. The Book of 50 Weeks, chapter 16, verse 28. In this way, the Book of 50 Weeks presents the law as a timeless code given to all righteous people from Adam onward. Moses was simply the one chosen to deliver it fully to the people of Israel. One of the most unique contributions of the Book of 50 Weeks to the story of Moses' law is its emphasis on the cosmic calendar. In the Book of 50 Weeks, keeping time, especially the Sabbath festivals and the Jubilee years, is central to the divine order. The laws about observing time are presented as part of the heavenly tablets, and obeying them is seen as a way to harmonize with the divine rhythm of the cosmos. In the Book of 50 Weeks, the solar calendar is emphasized over the lunar calendar with a year of 364 days. This system is considered the correct way to keep the commandments of God, ensuring that all festivals and Sabbaths fall on their proper days. The Book of 50 Weeks warns that deviating from this divine calendar can lead to spiritual disorder, which is why the system is seen as the right way to keep God's commandments, ensuring that all festivals and Sabbaths fall on their correct days. The Book of 50 Weeks warns that straying from this holy calendar can cause spiritual chaos, which is why laws about keeping time are very important in the law of Moses. And the Lord said to Comenton, Moses, write for the people of Israel the law of the Sabbath and the festivals for them. These times are fixed on the heavenly tablets, and you must observe them exactly, lest you fall into error. The Book of 50 Weeks, chapter 5, verse 2, focuses on this cosmic calendar, which is not prominent in the traditional Bible, where the Sabbath and festivals are mentioned, but without emphasis on their cosmic origin. The Book of 50 Weeks stresses that following this calendar is the key to being in the favor of God, as it aligns human life with the divine plan. While the law of Moses in the Bible was given specifically to the Israelites, the Book of 50 Weeks presents these laws as eternal binding, not only Israel, but all generations and even the angels. The Book of 50 Weeks emphasizes that the laws inscribed on the heavenly tablets are not just temporary guidelines for a single nation. They are eternal commandments governing both heaven and earth. In the Book of 50 Weeks, the laws given to Moses are meant for every creature of God to observe, including the angels who are described as keeping the Sabbath and observing God's festivals in heaven. This makes the law of Moses part of the cosmic order, extending beyond humanity and connecting the spiritual realm with the physical. And the law given to Moses on Mount Sinai is eternal and will be preserved in heaven and on earth. The angels keep the Sabbath, and the righteous will obey the commandments forever. The Book of 50 Weeks, chapter 5, verse 13. This idea of eternal law is not clear in the traditional Bible, where the focus is on the covenant between God and Israel. However, in the Book of 50 Weeks, the law is described as part of the cosmic order, binding both angels and humans within the divine order of God. In the Book of 50 Weeks, the future of Israel is not random. It is part of a divinely determined timeline inscribed on heavenly tablets from the beginning of time. This timeline outlines the rise and fall of nations, the exile and return of Israel, and the final judgment that will come upon the world. Everything that happens in human history, from creation to final judgment, follows the cosmic schedule recorded in heaven. One unique feature of the Book of 50 Weeks is the affirmation that these Events are predetermined, and nothing happens outside God's divine plan. The book offers a prophetic insight into Israel's journey, explaining that their exile, suffering, and restoration are all recorded in the heavenly records and must unfold according to the divine schedule. And all that will happen to Israel has been written on the heavenly tablets, from their rebellion to their redemption, and the appointed time for their deliverance has long been set. Book of 50 Weeks, chapter 23, verse 32. While Genesis and Exodus focus on specific events in Israel's history, the Book of 50 Weeks provides a broader view showing that Israel's destiny is part of a greater cosmic plan that has been divinely ordained. The Book of 50 Weeks strongly emphasizes the greater cosmic plan that has been predetermined. The Book of 50 Weeks places strong focus on the role of angels throughout Israel's history, but their intervention becomes far more significant and in the final era. In the Book of 50 Weeks, the angels of the Lord are responsible for executing God's judgment on the nations, ensuring that His divine will is carried out, both in heaven and on earth. As the final era approaches, the Book of Festivals describes how the angels will descend to separate the righteous from the wicked, gathering those who have remained faithful to the commandments of the Lord. The Book of Festivals also introduces the idea that Mastema, the chief of demons, will be bound and cast into the abyss, symbolizing the ultimate defeat of the forces of darkness. The Lord will send His angels to gather the elect, and they will bind the chief demon, throw him into the abyss until the day of judgment, when he will be destroyed forever. Festival chapter 23, verse 29. The depiction of angels as messengers of divine justice adds a unique layer of meaning to the prophecy about the end times. While traditional scripture speaks of angels in the context of judgment, in Revelation, the Book of Festivals presents a detailed vision of their role in the spiritual battle that will take place in the last days. One of the central themes in the Book of Festivals is the prophetic vision of Israel's redemption. The book emphasizes that although Israel rebelled and was exiled, the Lord had predetermined a time when they would be restored to their land and renewed in covenant with Him. This restoration is not merely a political event, it is a spiritual renewal, consistent with the cosmic plan recorded on the heavenly tablets. The heavenly tablets. According to the Book of Festivals, Israel's redemption will come after a time of great tribulation, during which the people will be purified, the law re-established, and benevolence. The people will again walk in holiness, preparing for the coming of Elenus, the Messiah, and the establishment of God's kingdom on earth. The time will come when the descendants of Israel to return to the Lord with all their heart, and He will gather them from the nations and establish them in their land, as recorded on the heavenly tablets. Book of Festivals, chapter 23, verse 26. While traditional scripture also speaks of Israel's restoration, see Isaiah and Jeremiah. The Book of Festivals adds the detail that this restoration is part of a predetermined timeline with specific events recorded in the heavenly records. In the last days, the Book of Festivals describes the coming of a messianic kingdom, where God's chosen ruler, often understood as the Messiah, will establishing righteousness on earth. The Book of Festivals emphasizes that this kingdom will mark the end of the current age and the beginning of the eternal reign of God, where the law is upheld and the righteous will inherit the land. The final judgment in the Book of Festivals includes the separation of the righteous from the wicked, with the wicked being cast into the lake of fire where they will be destroyed forever. Mastema and his demons will be defeated, and the Messiah will reign in peace and justice. This vision of the end times is consistent. The kingdom will mark the end of the current age and the beginning of the eternal reign of God, where the law is upheld and the righteous will inherit the land. The final judgment in the Book of 50 Weeks involves the separation of the righteous from the wicked. The wicked will be cast into the lake of fire, where they will be destroyed forever. Mastema and his evil spirits will be defeated, and the Messiah will reign in peace and justice. This vision of the last days aligns with the apocalyptic imagery in the Book of Revelation, but the Book of 50 Weeks places greater emphasis on the role of the law and the restoration of cosmic order, and emphasizes more the role of the law and the restored cosmic order and intrigue. God will establish his kingdom on earth, and the righteous will rule with him. For the law will be written on their hearts, and the wicked will be thrown into the lake of fire. Book of 50 Weeks, chapter 50, verse 13. The kingdom of the Messiah in the Book of 50 Weeks reflects a vision of restored creation, where the law is fully observed, and the righteous are rewarded for their faithfulness. The final judgment brings the complete defeat of evil, opening the era of eternal peace. If you find value in the deep exploration of the Book of 50 Weeks and its unique cosmic vision, the biblical history, be sure to share this video with those who may be interested in uncovering these profound mysteries. By sharing, you help us continue to explore ancient texts and reveal the hidden layers in God's eternal plan. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the conversation in the comments section. Together, we can delve even deeper into these incredibly fascinating biblical insights.